What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Organic Guy podcast. I am your host, the Organic Guy. This is your home of organic conversations, where you get to hear from various thought leaders across the organic movement. Today, I'm super excited to be joined by Mr. Hannes, who is a professional with over 10 years experience working in organic agriculture, regenerative food systems, short food supply chains, and social entrepreneurship. He has worked in Latin America, especially in Peru, where he spent 5 years training farmers. He worked in Europe with Ruche Qui, which is Europe's largest direct food sales network, whereby in 2020 they did gross sales over 14 million euros. Hannes is currently in East Africa, in Uganda, where he's started a CSA agroecology farm. He's also a mentor to 8 agroecology entrepreneurs, and he has started a very exciting and award-winning project called the Regenerative Fellowship, which we'll talk more about in a few minutes. But first, thank you very much for joining me in the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
So it's very clear to me from your past, I mean, you are very much entrenched in the areas of sustainable food systems and the areas of short food supply chains. But to give us a little bit of context, has this always been the case? I mean, I'm trying to go back to your early childhood here and try to see, were your parents talking more about sustainable food systems or sustainability in general? Were your neighbors talking about it? Or were you that children who was quite curious on things sustainable? How was your background and how did you end up in this particular space?
Yeah, so the brother of my grandmother used to be the last farmer in our family, and I remember going to harvest with all the family and playing and working a bit at his farm. But I'm a very urban kid actually, right? So when I was 7, my father took me, he was working with an NGO, and he took us to Bolivia, and I vividly remember the slaughtering of a sheep to thank Mother Earth for the water she was giving in a newly digged well in collaboration with a local farmer organization. So I guess that's aroused interest for me in working with water and agriculture, and then moving to Peru as an adult, that turned into my passion for organic agriculture, agroecology as a motor for rural development.
It's very interesting. You mentioned a little bit about that, and also I noticed on your background also you started business. So I'm also curious, how did you see that transition in terms of, I mean, you have a background in business and you're going into sustainability world where most of the times, NGOs are involved, governments are now very much involved, and they're offering very good incentives for private businesses as well to come in. How do you see that? How do you find that experience? Was it an easy transition for you to go into this space? Or, there were some things that you needed to relearn per se in order to go into the sustainability world?
It felt quite natural for me. I'm a trained economist, manager, macroeconomist, let's say. But solidarity, inclusiveness, and fairness have been really given to me by my parents from a young age. So I thank them for that. And then when coming in the real world after university, I found quite some differences between what I had learned and how the economy actually works. What I came to see as a root cause of a lot of the challenges we're facing as society is economic inequality, right? The Oxfam report stating that 1% of the world now owns more than all of the rest of us combined. That's economic inequality right there. And I think that's really very elementary to the problems we're facing. Together with that, especially here on the African continent, we can talk about the job creation deficit, right? There's about 1 million new youth coming into the job market every month, and we're only creating 3 million jobs a year in Africa, which means there's a 9 million job creation deficit. No, that's huge, and I really see that materializing here with friends I meet in Uganda, and despite having university degrees, they can't access any relevant job and start building their own careers. So after university, I guess I was really literally dropped in Peru. So I appreciated that opportunity to start relearning, as you said, or developing my economic perspective from a smallholder farmer point of view. And yeah, I've been thinking a lot and learning a lot about sustainable economic development and how also to sustainably develop economic initiatives,
Yeah.
and then the importance, of course, of fair prices and livelihoods for smallholder farmers.
You mentioned a little bit there that you were literally dropped in Peru, where you worked for about 5 years trying to train farmers, for example, building direct food systems, PGS advocacy. So how was that experience? I mean, did you see any difference between their food systems and European food system? I mean, you spend majority of your time in Europe, and then going into that territory of Peru and trying to understand their food system. First of all, did you see a difference in their food systems? And what do you think is the difference, if you saw any difference between their food systems and from the European perspective?
Yeah, personally, I guess I needed to learn and adapt on how people relate and work together in that culturally different context, but there were no unusual shocks or difficulties there. What I really appreciated in Peru is it's an amazing country with an amazing natural environment and biodiversity. Peru is one of the most biodiverse countries in the world,
Yeah.
and you can really see that on your plate. So I was there in the midst of the gastronomic boom, which was also helping us as the organic movement to connect to that popularity of local gastronomy and also using it as a platform to promote biodiversity and smallholder agriculture, which is mostly conservationist of nature, right?
Yeah.
So that was really a really great opportunity, I would say. A second thing I really appreciated about Peru is the Andean cosmovision, of how everything's is related in our natural environment. How after farming or before farming, the apus, the gods that are represented in the local mountain peaks, are thanked and appreciated. So yeah, this might sound a bit fluffy, but we are all connected. Two things that really surprised me. I already mentioned biodiversity, but we were working with a farmer in Cusco region called Julio Hanco, or also the Potato King. There's a movie about him even. He was cultivating 300 to 400 varieties of native potatoes in his fields, right? And so that's an amazing biodiversity being cultivated and maintained throughout generations. So it was really a surprising fact for me. And then maybe less positive, I was also fascinated by the rapid loss of local culture, tradition, languages, and also the disintegration of community life, which I guess is also something we can see happening here in East Africa at the moment. And yeah, we've been way past that in Europe, I would say.
You have a very exciting project, as I mentioned earlier, that is already award-winning. I mean, I'm talking about the Regeneration Fellowship already. So can you give us an idea how did this vision come about, and what is this vision that you have for this project?
Yeah, so I basically came to Uganda together with my wife and looking for things to work on, and had a lot of ideas and started mapping them. And then I realized it's probably not me who needs to build local food solutions here and make sure they're adapted to the context. And I wanted to support creating that environment where local entrepreneurs can really turn their ideas into viable businesses. So what I want to do with the Regeneration Fellowship is to build a startup studio approach to creating, founding, and funding the food companies of tomorrow, based on three important elements. First of all, regenerative agriculture, so sustainable, nature-positive, agroecological approach to agriculture and our food system, and strengthening that organic agroecological food system from within by building new business leaders, supporting them, let's say, to grow, and then also by doing so creating a demand for organic produce, and as such an incentive for farmers to produce sustainably and to move forward in their transition to agroecology. The second principle is the one of social entrepreneurship, which I came to appreciate a lot also with my experience in Europe, as a way to align for-profit business, self-reliant in its growth and growing its impact most of all, and combining that with impact measures and impact goals really on an equal basis, right?
Yeah.
The profits are also only a means to an end and not an end in itself. And then the final component is steward ownership, which is a way of changing the way our food companies are managed, financed, and owned. No, steward ownership is a relatively new concept. Also to me, I just found out about it beginning of this year. To avoid mission drift in purpose-driven companies. It's also being promoted by the Purpose Foundation. And basically, what it does is to ingrain the mission of a company into its legal DNA by separating voting rights, decision rights, and giving those to the stakeholders or the stewards of that company's mission from the financial dividend shares or rights that can be returned to investors, who can still get a fair return on their investment, of course, but those exits are more defined, and in that way we are moving away from venture capitalism kind of hockey stick seeking or unicorn hunting kind of growth and investments. And I'm really excited about that, because it's a way to make sure that stakeholder long-term value will always be more important than short-term financial profits. And as you said, we got awarded for this innovative combination between regenerative agriculture, steward ownership, and social entrepreneurship. And the idea of the project is to build to develop a startup studio approach, which basically consists of first selecting talents who want to be game changers in the food system with entrepreneurial backgrounds, corporate backgrounds, or just young, passionate, driven people with their mission where their heart is. The second step is then to take all of them together and conduct the food system analysis to really identify the pivotal or the key cornerstone problems of that system, and then start building solutions around those key challenges. And only after having identified and building and testing those solutions, only then starting to develop teams or build teams around those solutions to assure there is a best possible fit between talent and the solution, and also between the solution and the context. And then of course, prepare those ventures to start looking for finance and officially launch. That would be the program. In about 4 to 6 months, we want to go through the first stages of that program. And the aim is to pilot next year here in Uganda to validate also all the hypotheses we have behind this approach and see how this model will work here in East Africa. And I'm looking at the moment at financial and technical partners to do so. I already have a first potential investor or founder, but definitely need one or two more.
It's a very inspirational story. And when I look at it, especially the last part of steward ownership, as you mentioned, it's quite a new concept, but I sort of like it because we've seen scenarios before where companies start with a good heart and they have very great missions, but later on, they get different investors, and at the end of the day, investors want quick returns in their money, and missions always change over time as those funds come in. So, for example, in Kenya, we had Twiga Foods, which hailed one of the best companies in East Africa in terms of helping farmers and helping them find market, reducing the distance between them and different vendors. But we can see when they got different investments, they sort of abandoned that vision as time goes on. So it's a very interesting perspective on how can we ingrain these missions into the company itself. And for me, it looks very, very, outbreaking, and I can't wait to see how it actually works out in the real world. So definitely a great, and looking forward to see how it goes ahead as well.
Yeah, I visited East African fruits in Tanzania, who is very similar to Twiga foods,
Yeah.
I believe. And of course, there's always a gap between the initial ideals of the founders
Yeah.
and the practical reality of implementing such a business and keeping it afloat. So we also need to recognize that. But I think what you said is real. Mission drift is a strong risk, especially in VC type of financing. So yeah, to me, steward ownership is the perfect approach to just avoiding that issue.
Yeah, and one thing also that keeps me positive that this is definitely going to be a success is your historical background, because you are heavily involved here in Europe with La Ruche Qui, which you are very much part of it. You are at the heart of it, especially establishing it in Belgium and also in the Netherlands, and very critical of it in 2020 when they did about 14 million euros. So can you give us an idea from your experience being involved in that particular project? How do you see? Do you think that the consumer was ready for such a kind of a project, or do you think that just by your sheer determination and sheer marketing of that product is what made it to be as successful in the end?
Yeah, I think I mean La Ruche, or the food assembly in English, is a great example of a social startup, and its timing of launching 2011 in France and later in different countries across Europe was very right on spot. No, so that helped a lot in the booming of that network and the fast growth. I got involved right after coming back from Peru in 2015, and then launched our business, as you said, in the Dutch part of Belgium and also the Netherlands afterwards, to then manage the network in those countries and keep on developing that business with the team and our local community hosts. I think the time was definitely right, but one of three key challenges, of course, was the fact that consumers always tend to go for the convenient option in the end. No, there's still quite the gap between the change in our behavioral thinking and then the action we put to those words and thoughts. So that's definitely a challenge. And the food assembly is answering to that also by trying to make accessing this kind of alternative food systems more accessible by a state-of-the-art web platform, weekly meetings, also developing several delivery options and so on. So they're really doing a great job at that, and it was a very amazing experience for me to be part of that.
Yeah.
A second challenge that I think is very critical to the development of short food supply chains in general is the economics of logistics. No, I guess that's what wholesalers and the long supply chains have been particularly good at. Of course, also being it at certain costs. But what I like about the food assembly there again is that we were building a decentralized food system, trying to decentralize logistics, the costs of it, but also the added value to and bringing more of that to the farmers, the producers of our foods.
Yeah.
And then another interesting field of tension that we really needed to work with, also relating to the organic movement, I would say, is to stop looking at organic as something binary, 0 or 1,
Yeah.
bad or good, organic or not. I really came to believe that it's more important to look at it as a spectrum or a continuum from degenerative, industrial, large-scale agriculture to the more regenerative, decentralized kind of agroecological food systems we want to move to.
Yeah.
And no matter what your position is on that continuum at this moment, what's most important, I would say, is your next step forward. Your next step to more sustainable and agroecological production and consumption methods.
Yeah, interesting last point there, because Organic 3.0, as you know very well, is trying to bridge that gap you mentioned, where it is a binary option. So currently it is, are you certified organic farmer or not? So, and Organic 3.0, we can see how different actors, when they wrote that particular strategy, is about how can we help that small farmer who is doing organic principles in their farming systems but necessarily aren't able to access market. How can we enable them so that we don't see like there's a fence where they need to climb fast in order to join the organic community. So looking at it as a spectrum is a very good idea as well, to try and bring in different people into the system as well, but as long as they are very much enshrined with organic principles, so that we can help them to grow and hold their hands as they continue in this particular journey. So I think that's a very, very important point to note as we continue to apply and implement the 3.0 strategy moving forward.
I think we definitely also need to be aware of greenwashing efforts in the industry, and maybe definitions being deliberately kept vague and so on. But I love the Organic 3.0 vision, and I think they did a great work in formulating the way forward for organic and the agroecology and regenerative agriculture movement as a whole. Yeah. Because I think in the principles and end goals, they are very much alike.
Yeah. Talking about the next step, I mean, right now you are very much entrenched in East Africa now, and especially in Uganda, where you are currently mentoring about 8 young agroecological entrepreneurs. So I would like to get your perspective on how has your experience been, interacting these entrepreneurs, and you can sort of give us also an overview. How are you seeing this particular environment, especially for entrepreneurs? And you're very much also involved here in Europe in an entrepreneurial journey. So can you sort of help us, give us a context on how has been your experience, especially in an entrepreneurial environment there in Uganda? And then when you look up here in Europe, do you see any differences? And if yes, what are some of those differences you're seeing?
Yeah, let me start by first saying that what they all have in common, all social entrepreneurs, is that they're very passionate, especially in agroecology. So that's a great starting point, I would say. I do see clearly some differences in levels of exposure to innovation, to out-of-the-box thinking, to food systems thinking itself. So that's also one of the elements I would like to develop as a part of the Regeneration Fellowship startup studio approach. Somebody told me here, everyone is doing what their neighbor is doing, and I guess that makes it hard, to differentiate yourself in your community and local market and economy. So I guess sometimes I would be looking for more innovative ideas, even though they're definitely there, and also there's nothing wrong in replicating and adapting to your local context a solution that is successful elsewhere, right? So that's one key difference. And then of course I do think that the institutional environment in Europe, for instance, is more favorable. Access to capital and technical support is also there. At the same time, there's more regulation, so maybe a little less space for creative development of social enterprises. But here it keeps on coming back. Access to finance and technical support is really a key challenge in social entrepreneurship here in Uganda and East Africa. I'm currently working with BioVision on the development of an East African agroecology accelerator, which should be launched as of next year, to support existing agroecological businesses to shift gears and grow their impact by providing support and access to finance. And with the Regeneration Ship, that's also essentially what I want to be doing.
Amazing job. The fact that you are very much ready and involved in terms of trying to help different young entrepreneurs. And I think we can all agree, starting an entrepreneur's journey is always a very difficult process. So at least having someone who has been through that journey and giving you guidance makes things a little bit easier, and also makes you a little bit calm, which allows you to be innovative and think outside the box. And for me, these are kind of the initiatives that we need more in terms of trying to understand their context and help them to innovate and come up with very new and different ideas. So I'm also very excited and see how those different entrepreneurs move forward.
And there's definitely a lot of open questions, right? Is the startup studio something that will work in East Africa. There's Fresh Venture Studios, who is actually, they came up with very similar ideas to what I want to develop, and they are 18 months ahead of me. They're going to start this approach in Europe next month in November. They're starting their first cohort of entrepreneurs and future founders. But yeah, how is that going to work here in Uganda and other East African countries? What is the steward ownership? What kind of fit is that to the way African founders look at starting businesses and owning them? There's still a lot of questions to be answered in the future. That's why I desperately need to pilot as soon as possible.
You have now been, you're now involving yourself in starting an agroecological CSA farm. So I'm just wondering also, what has been your experience about starting it? I mean, how do different farmers responded to it? What was their first, reaction when you shared with them this particular idea of starting a CSA farm? Was it something that they have had before? Was this a new concept? Did they think that it can actually work? So help us get into their minds and try to give us that perspective. What was their reactions when you're sharing them to this particular CSA farm?
Yeah, so every CSA farm usually works with one or only a couple of farmers, right? And in January, I was talking to some young university graduates, agronomists, Fred and Patience, and I dropped the idea of starting a CSA basically because I was looking at healthy vegetables, also for my own consumption, because the things I can find here in the market are quite doubtful in terms of quality and production methods, let's say. And only 10 days after they sent me a business plan, and then we started working on that business plan, fine-tuning it, looking for our first members, and in June we started our first field activities. Actually, they did. I'm just trying to support them in the setup and management of this project. Tomorrow we actually have our first, our third member meeting, but it's quite a critical moment in time because we need to renew the membership fees for the next harvest season, and it's definitely a challenging endeavor, but it's great to move forward. And what we're actually doing, and that's really important, is that we're reshaping the relationships around food production and consumption. No, usually it's the resource poor farmer that is carrying all the burden and risks that are associated with costs of production, bad harvests, pests infection, and so on, infestation, and so on. And now we're moving all or most of that risk to the consumers, to the community. So that the concept is basically to prepay your harvest share. We now paid first time for half a year of production on our farm, still running until end of November, that first harvest season. And by doing so, we also share the risks of having a bad harvest, but also the fruits of that harvest, right? So if okra or the beans worked out really well, we'll have more of those in our weekly basket. If tomatoes were a complete failure because of difficulties with our soil that needs to be regenerated or pest infestation and so on, then we'll have no or very little tomatoes in our basket, and that's part of agriculture, right? And so we're trying to bring that reality also closer to the consumers again.
The thing that I like about this particular concept is that it's helping farmers to sort of decentralize that particular risk, because in normal circumstances, if, for example, you mentioned beans don't do well, the farmer just slides with it. I mean, absorbs all the risks. But in this particular time, I mean, when you're involved in this CSA, that risk is spread across all members, sort of decentralized in a way, which I can imagine could help keep a lot of farmers afloat as well. So, interesting concept, and it's great to see that it's actually working on different contexts, and also working in a very remote part of Africa, which is very, very much exciting, how easy it can also be replicated to different parts of Africa as well.
Yeah, definitely. For me, it's a very hands-on and grateful experience to be involved with those young people, Fred and Patience, also actually facing that difficulty, of finding a job, and now really being involved in this very beautiful community project.
So I also would like to get your perspective on this particular point. I mean, you are very well versed on different parts of the world. You've very much entrenched yourself in Europe, in Latin America, and now in Africa. So, from a sustainable food system point of view, can you compare this particular three regions? I mean, are they even comparable at all in terms of their food systems? And if yes, what do you see are the major differences? Because the first thing that comes to mind is Africa, small-scale farmers. Latin America, probably small-scale farmers. Europe is very much industrialized. From your experience, what can you tell us on these three different food systems and how they compare with each other?
Yeah, that's a fantastic, but also a very ambitious question, no, for me to answer. I think there are definitely different levels of economic development, political regimes, poverty, for sure, and also infrastructure, for instance, to bring your goods to the market, that we should consider. But I also see a lot of commonalities, no? For instance, access to land, access to finance, access to markets, access to quality inputs. They're challenging basically anywhere. So that's food waste is another example. That great food losses after harvest is another challenge that it's, I guess, common to our global food system. Something that really surprised me here in Africa is the way the green revolution has polluted mindsets. The mindsets of extension workers, the mindsets of policymakers, development professionals, and so on. And that's really alarming to me. I'd say even though it's very popular, no, in public policy, let's say, to work on green revolution kind of solutions, even though the use of chemicals is actually still quite low. Here in Uganda, only 23% of farming households applies chemical inputs. No, another interesting figure is that the false promises study found out that over the last decades, costs of inputs have risen 20%, while the actual yields related to those chemical inputs only improved by 5%. No, so there's definitely something wrong in the logic there. That's a great or an unfortunate point, I think, here in East Africa. Second big challenge to me, and it's been debated largely now with the UN Food System Summit, is that our ambition to move forward with a truly sustainable food system and the agroecological approach is positioned as the best way forward to do so. It's actually a political decision. It's not a technical issue. It's not an economical challenge. It's mostly political in my opinion. So that's building that political vision and also having that urgency translate into action. That's a very big challenge we're currently facing. And a final element is corporate capture is real. No, we've seen it now at the Food System Summit itself, and in most of our food systems, unfortunately, we can observe unfair trading practices and oligopolies. No, in meat, in beers, in grains, in tea, in all of those products on the world level. There's only four companies controlling more than 80% of the world markets. I would also say that there is no free market in food, right? The only thing we see, or what we mostly see, I would say, is unfair trade instead of free trade. And so even liberal economists would turn around in their graves.
At the core of it is how bad do our leaders want it? How bad do consumers want it? Because at the end, we are the people who have to make decisions. So it doesn't matter if you are in Africa, Europe, or in Latin America. It's about how do you want, especially now from a consumer perspective, are you able to demand sustainable foods from your supermarket or from your supplier or from your local grocery? They are at different levels, but as a consumer myself, you have to start by, what are the basic decisions that I can make in order to make this food system accelerate? And you can decide by, what you're buying, for example. Is it, sustainable? Is it, something that I will be proud of? as I continue to look forward to more sustainable food systems, and especially buying from sustainable farmers, for example, it helps send a message to them that yes, your sustainable food systems, I want your product, so you can continue producing more. And to some extent, as consumers, we have a huge role to play as different entities, governments, non-government organizations continue to work to push it towards this particular end as well.
Yeah, I want to react to that, and I think we should be careful about that too. I mean, we've discussed the issue of or the difficulty of behavioral change and consumers going for the more convenient option. So it's also really important to look at the options they have at hand. No, of course we should eat less meat, we should fly less, we should turn off the lights when we leave the room, and so on. But this is a systemic problem, and that's why I want to insist on the political part of this debate and about finally making decisions, start taxing carbon emissions, for instance, start looking at food safety and food or nutrient density of food, and making that information available to consumers, and really take into account which options consumer are having and are also presented with, and which options companies can also develop to present to those consumers. So I think it's really more of a systemic discussion, and policy has an important role to play, and is lagging behind. But luckily also there's a great momentum of agroecology, being increasingly recognized by multilateral institutions, backed by science. There is a gigantic amount of scientific evidence on the role of agroecology in transforming our food system. There are huge farmer movements, and the agroecological, regenerative, and organic movements are growing, and their momentum is now.
As you mentioned, the United Nations is talking about sustainable food systems. Every major organizations from an international stage is talking a move towards sustainable food system. Here in Europe, in the European Union, they have a very ambitious farm to fork strategy as well, which is sustainable food systems as the center of this transition. So we can see definitely there is a shift in mindset and also in actions towards sustainable food systems. And that leads me to my next question here now, is the fact that you've spent largely majority of your your career in this particular system. I'm talking about sustainable food systems. I'm talking about short food supply chains. What can you say has been your major takeaway from your involvement in these systems? Are we moving towards a sustainable food systems? And what do you think needs to be done in order to accelerate this transition?
Yeah, what's great about the SDGs for 2030 is this idea of we only have 9 harvests left. So there's definitely a great sense of urgency that I also wanna transmit, and also always try to insist on. What did I come to appreciate as key takeaways? I would say all of the above, probably. And an interesting question I came across lately was, do we want more or less farmers? It's a powerful question indeed, but maybe I would rephrase the question: do we want more farmers and people in general to escape, to be able to overcome poverty, or not? And if we want so, then recognizing that we're looking at countries where 60 to 80% of the population depends on subsistence agriculture, then I think we need to rebuild our food systems, distributing power and economic relationships, and working towards flourishing agroecological communities with diversified farms, local food supply chain networks, regenerating soil health, water management, and so on. And we know how to do all of that. So it's really, again, a political decision and support that needs to be put behind or to those words. We have agroecology. We can work on permaculture at landscape levels, which would be a very exciting project I would also love to work on and regenerative agriculture is booming. So we know where to go, and just needs to start taking those next steps. And if I mean, looking at nature is beautiful. No, agroecological systems are beautiful, and it's just we need to find ways of optimizing our food outputs in those systems. And I say optimizing, not maximizing, to be clear. No, so yeah, we can regenerate soils. We can even bring back rains with this kind of agroecological approach, and revive communities. No, so talk to any smallholder farmer, any agroecological entrepreneur, and you'll feel that same passion, and that's really keeping me very hopeful.
I must say, from this conversation, I also feel very hopeful in terms of what direction we are going to take moving forward. I'm very empowered now as a consumer, very empowered from a macro perspective as well, in terms of what different international organizations are doing. I'm also very inspired from your personal experiences as well, in terms of what you've been doing across the world, basically, from Latin America, from Europe into Africa now, some of the amazing projects that you're involved. For me, I'm super inspired, and I'm sure a lot of people will be able to listen to these conversations will be super inspired as well. Maybe your last thoughts as we conclude this conversation?
Well, yeah, also just want to thank you. I also think that the work you're doing with these podcasts and colleagues of yours doing similar kind of podcasts are mutually inspiring me and a lot of other people. So I think that's also a very important work you're doing. And yeah, I just want to express, I guess, my drive to keep on working as part of the organic movement here in Uganda and East Africa and all across the world, hopefully developing this Regeneration Fellowship startup studio approach in the coming years, and hopefully being able to spread that to different countries, enabling local entrepreneurs, people like you, to start their businesses and find co-founders and really develop the best solutions for the local context based on agroecological principles.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your compliment as well. It always feels good when you see a lot of people appreciating your work as well. So thank you very much. I'd like us to go into our fun part of the interview, although there's a lot of information that we have already discussed about. This is a rapid fire question. So where I just throw to you a question and you give me your answers. And so, are you ready to get started?
Yeah, let's go.
Okay. First question. What is the first career that you dreamed of having as a kid?
Obviously, before becoming aware about CO2 emissions, I wanted to be a flight pilot.
Second question. If you had to eat one thing for every meal going forward, what would that be?
I always say it's pizza, or hopefully, if I can choose a category, it would be the Italian cuisine. No, I really love the freshness and the quality of their ingredients, and enjoyed very much going to Terra Madre and just seeing all those all that richness, and natural agro biodiversity.
Good taste right there. Number 3, who is your favorite historical figure?
I'll mention Pepe Mujica. He's a philosopher. He's also a former rebel, so probably not innocent in that sense. And he's also an ex-president of Uruguay. And I appreciate him because every interview with him is a treat from a philosophical point of view, and he has shown the world that being a politician is actually being in service of your people.
Fourth question: what sport do you like to watch or participate in?
Surfing waves. I started doing that in Peru, and I'll never let go of it again.
Nice. Hopefully, do you find some places to do surfing in Uganda?
In Uganda, it's a landlocked country, so that's challenging.
Yeah, nice. Okay. Fifth question: if you could have any animal in the world as a pet, what would it be and why?
I'm not sure about pets, but I definitely would love to be an eagle one day.
An eagle. Okay, good. What is your favorite beverage? Coffee or tea?
Tea. Yeah, I don't drink coffee.
Question number 7. What is your favorite book?
There's many, but at the moment I'm reading Hungry City from Caroline Steele, which really is a nice expose about how our relation with food actually shaped our cities. Really insightful.
The next question is, I mean, we are a few months away from Christmas, but I'd like to have your take on this. How old were you when you realized Santa isn't real?
Actually, I'm not sure about Santa. It was quite early, but in Belgium we have also Saint Nicholas, who brings us gifts on the 6th of December.
Yeah.
And I tried, when I found out he wasn't real, I tried to hide that from my parents as long as possible.
What quote resonates with you most?
I'll take Je mange donc je suis, which is a version or variation of Descartes. No, I eat so I am. I think it's a great quote in describing how what we eat shapes us, and how our relationship to food also is intrinsically tied to our relationship with the world around us.
And lastly, knowing what you know right now, what advice would you give to your 18-year-old self?
This one is difficult. I feel very privileged in life. I come from a very privileged background, so I would tell myself to manage that privilege responsibly, and to enjoy while I'm at it.
Nice. Definitely loved that particular session. I mean, it sort of helped the viewers to get to know you a little bit better. So thank you very much for participating in, and got to learn a few things about you as well. So thank you very much for joining me in the podcast. It's been a very much pleasure to have you on. Great insights, great information as well. A lot of viewers will find this very, very informational. So thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, thank you for the great questions, and I really enjoyed this too. Thanks a lot.
Nice. Cheers.